Hello, everybody. Today I will be presenting my master's thesis for the BA-MA program in political science entitled Symbiosis, Republican Presidents, and the Federalist Society. So before I get into it, I just want to give a little bit of a primer on how I got into this subject. My freshman year of college was obviously when Donald Trump was president, and there was a lot of coverage of his lower court appointees to the federal judiciary, and that seemed a little odd to me. Like maybe I had just grown up and was actually reading the news, or maybe I was just seeing this for the first time. But either way, I kind of wanted to dig into it deeper and investigate why exactly it was there was this media coverage. And it was because his nominees were more and more conservative and less qualified as time went on. And so I was kind of asking, why did this happen? And so I came to the Federalist Society. So the Federalist Society frames itself as a network of law students, lawyers, and other legal professionals that share a general want to have a conservative ideology be prevalent in the judiciary and in law schools. And it started as a reaction to the perceived liberalizations of legal academies, as well as the law field in general, especially following decisions like Gideon versus Wainwright and Brown v. Board of Education, which I feel like a lot of us have heard of that one. And so they have this informal power in the selection and confirmation of federal judges that is kind of universally accepted amongst judicial policy scholars, but it's not really looked at empirically in current political science literature, so that's kind of the gap that I wanted to fill. So going back a little bit, I want to do a quick civics recap about presidents and judicial selection to frame this question. So presidents have the power to appoint all Article III judges conditioned on whether they are confirmed by the Senate. So this means they can appoint them to the Supreme Court, which is pretty prevalent in our knowledge and in the news these days, but they also have federal district and circuit court judges that they have influence in who gets appointed to the bench. Judges serve a life term, so they are a lasting part of presidential legacy, which is really important because presidents, they only have 4 to 8 years, and they want to leave this lasting mark on American politics, and judges are a great way to do this because especially increasingly recently, judges have been the final arbiter of a lot of legal decisions and have done a lot of lawmaking because of Senate gridlock. And so presidents want judges that are ideologically aligned with their policy preferences so that they will rule in certain ways ad infinitum. So currently, there are 874 authorized federal judgeships, and while those may not all be open during a president's term, that's still a lot of judges that a president wants to fill, and the main goal is that they don't want to leave any vacancies open because they don't want their next president to fill them with someone who is ideologically opposed to their ideas. So why study the Federalist Society in this context? I'm going to go look specifically at the second quote, but if you'd like to read the first quote, that's from Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who is a Democrat in the Senate. So the first part of this quote is, the Federalist Society has a de facto monopoly on the credentialing of rising stars. And that's kind of where I got this idea of the Federalist Society is probably a signal in the judicial nominations process of quality and of conservative ideology, more importantly, that makes it easier for presidents to identify nominees that align with their ideology. So this is where my theory came about. The president gives up some power to the Federalist Society in this ideological signal, and they want to get something back in return, or else why would they give up that power? The relationship between the presidents and the Federalist Society, I hypothesize, is mutually beneficial, or what I refer to in my project as symbiotic. The benefits to the Federalist Society are pretty straightforward. They have access to these nominations and to the Justice Department as a whole. They get increased legitimacy, and they have this judicial policy-making influence before the judges even get on the bench. And then the presidential benefits are what I'm mostly empirically analyzing, and so the Federalist Society provides this signal of ideological reliability, which means that presidents and their administration have to spend less time looking for whether this person is ideologically reliable and, in my specific project, conservative. And this is conditioned on my novel addition to this field, which is looking at different levels of Federalist Society association and whether they provide different strengths of signals. Previous studies have looked at a binary, are they associated, are they not? And I kind of go a little bit into deeper granularity to understand whether there is a benefit to being like a dues-paying member of the Federalist Society, or do you just have to know someone and attend a couple events? So I'll briefly go over my data and my methods section. If you have questions about how I collected the data, you can ask it during the Q&A, but it was very painstaking and took me 2 years. So the variables of interest are this Federalist Society Association variable, which as you can see on the bottom of the slide, I look at in 2, kind of 3 different ways. You'll see that later. This binary measure as a kind of robustness check to look at how people usually look at it, and then this new ordinal model, which is 4 points, ranging from none to affiliated, which means that they are not a dues-paying member, or at least they don't report that they are, but they have given a certain amount of speeches and written for this society. Whether they are a dues-paying member, as indicated on their Judiciary Committee questionnaire, and whether they are a leader, which is gleaned from the same source. My dependent variable is looking at time from vacancy to nomination in days. This is adjusted for many factors. Again, if you're curious, you can ask. But I want to look at whether the president has a shorter time from vacancy to nomination when this signal is in play. And then there are a bunch of controls, and I'm looking at Republican presidential administrations from 1985 to 2020. So that's Reagan, Bush 1, Bush 2, and Trump. So this graph up here is showing a general descriptive trend showing that, conditioned by court type, there is a general decrease in the amount of days from vacancy to nomination as the level of Federalist Society increases in a nominee. So this is my big fancy table that I really wanted to show you because it's my big fancy table. But all the way on the left, you can see the circled value for leaders at the district court is negative 4.32. Now, I used a negative binomial model, which is a form of account model, which we don't really need to get into statistics here, but this actually translates to 282 days fewer from vacancy to nomination at the district level for Federalist Society leaders, which not only is statistically significant, but pretty substantially significant as well. So here are some conclusions, as well as a silly picture of Ted Cruz that I really liked. The binary measure of Federalist Society Association does not predict the length of a vacancy. None of those measures were statistically significant, but the new ordinal association measure is significant for all models, especially at the membership and leadership levels, which are the highest levels of association in my model. Overall, this is very supportive evidence that the Federalist Society Association does provide a subsidy for the president's search for judicial nominees. I want to thank my advisor, Dr. Lauren Mattioli. I couldn't have done this without her. The head of the advanced programs, Dr. Spencer Piston, the whole BU political science faculty, my wonderful friends and girlfriend over there, and my family.
Thank you. We'll take questions now. Anyone that has?
It's just really good. You guys don't have any questions. That's fine.
Hi. So you mentioned the difficulty of data collection. Yeah. I'd like to hear the story of the pain behind it.
Yeah. So there is no current data set before I made it that existed that showed when a vacancy was created, who vacated it, what district, what seat, and who filled it at what date, and whether or not they were confirmed or not. So first of all, I had to create that whole data set, and then I went through, this is about 1,180 something judicial nominees, and then I went through their Senate Judiciary questionnaires if they had them, and identified by hand each one whether they were in the Federalist Society and what level, and then if they didn't have a Senate Judiciary questionnaire, I had to do extra research looking for news articles, anything on the website, and anything else that would indicate that they were in some way affiliated. And then I put that all into R and have about 500 lines of code, and that's a low estimate at this point.
Other questions?
What do you think your findings say about like the legitimacy of the U.S. judicial system and the appointee process as a whole?
I I think that's, it depends on how you look at it. I think for a lot of people who are supportive of it, they think that this is a very legitimate way of doing things because it's creating these networks so people who know what judiciary is like Antonin Scalia or Clarence Thomas, can help select these people and help handpick them. In my opinion, I think it's a really interesting look into the current state of hyperpluralism in the United States and the way in which outside organizations have a huge impact on the judiciary, even if they don't claim to take political positions like the Federalist Society does.
Hi, Ilana. I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thanks, Queen.
And I was wondering what you are going to take from what you learned into your career moving forward.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm gonna take this data to my grave. And I'm really interested in expanding upon this project in graduate school, possibly if that's the direction that this takes me. I have some other ideas about whether the quality of a judicial nominee increases or decreases with this nomination, creating a whole picture using qualitative and quantitative data as to what the Federalist Society looks like post-Trump. But there are a lot of different things, and I also want to add some more control variables. I feel like anyone who works with data knows that you're never really done with it, so.
We could do one last question. Here you go.
This is a little zoomed out from the Federalist Society, but
Yeah.
do you think, after your research, that there is an incentive now for presidents to use the judiciary to cement their legacy rather than going through kind of the standard way that we were all taught in a civics class, which was through the legislative branch, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so I think that the judiciary, and a lot of political scientists would agree with me, that the judiciary is becoming increasingly relevant in lawmaking, given that a lot of times there's so much gridlock that comes with Congress that they can't really check the judiciary and they can't pass a law that overrides a judicial decision that often. Not to say that the legislative branch isn't at all efficient. They do a lot more stuff than we think they do, but you know. So I think given this kind of conundrum, this avenue is really important. And also, judges have a lifetime appointment, and senators can be voted out if if the majority of people don't like what they're doing. Judges, there's very little check. It's been years since the judicial impeachment, and even then, they really often don't go through. So I think it's a really impactful and long-lasting way that can't really be overturned easily.
Thank you, Ilana.